A boot slammed into the ribs of something living. The body folded sideways and hit the gravel hard. A second kick landed. Then a third. The animal didn't scream. It just shuddered and tried to pull air through a bloodied nose. A man stood over it with a length of pipe in his hand. He swung once. The pipe cracked against bone. The horse's leg buckled. The man walked to a pickup truck. The engine started. The truck pulled off the shoulder and disappeared down an empty road. The horse lay there, eyes still open, still breathing, just barely. Then a sound came from the other direction. The deep, slow growl of a Harley engine getting closer. The rider's name was Frank Calloway. What does a Hells Angels biker do when he finds a half-dead horse bleeding out on the side of a road? Stay with me on this one. Frank Calloway killed the engine. The bike rumbled into silence. He sat there a second, looking at what was on the road. Then he swung off the seat. His boots hit the dirt with a heavy crunch. He was a big man. 6'3", 240 pounds. Gray beard down to his chest. Leather vest over a black t-shirt. The patch on his back said what it said. Hells Angels. Burdu Charter. He'd been riding with them 31 years. Frank walked over slow. Not because he wasn't sure. Because the horse was scared, and a man his size moving fast was the last thing she needed. He crouched down 10 feet away. The animal was a chestnut mare. Maybe 4 years old. Hard to tell with her ribs sticking out the way they were. She had a halter on. Cheap red nylon. The kind a careless person buys at a feed store and never replaces. Her left foreleg was bent at a wrong angle. Her side was sticky with blood. One eye was swollen shut. The other watched him. Frank didn't move. He talked to her instead. Quiet. Slow. I ain't him, he said. I ain't whoever did this. The mare's ear twitched. Then it pinned flat against her skull. Yeah. I get it. He pulled out his phone. Held it to his ear. Tully. It's me. I need your trailer. A horse. Somebody put a horse on the side of Route 18 and beat hell out of it. No, it's still breathing. I don't know how. Just get out here. Bring the trailer. And a tarp. And whatever clean water you got. He hung up. For the next 40 minutes, Frank didn't move. He stayed in his crouch, 10 feet from the mare, talking to her in that same quiet voice. He told her about the road. He told her about a dog he'd had once, 20 years back, that had been hit by a car and lived. He told her that his bike was a 1998 Softal, and it didn't usually pull a trailer, but today it would. He didn't say any of it because he thought she understood the words. He said it because the sound of a calm voice was the only medicine he had on him. Tully showed up in a beat-up F-250 with a horse trailer hooked behind. Tully was 67. Skinny as a rail. 40 years, a farrier before his hands gave out. He took one look at the mare, and his face went hard. Frank, he said, this horse needs a vet. Or a bullet. Then she gets a vet. Frank, get the ramp down. The two of them worked her into the trailer. It took an hour. Tully knew horses. Frank knew how to be patient with frightened things. At one point, the mare tried to bolt, and her broken leg gave out under her, and she screamed for the first time. The sound of it stayed with Frank a long time after. He kept his hand on her shoulder until she stopped shaking. Tully drove. Frank rode behind on the Harley. His place was 40 minutes off the highway. 12 acres. A shop, a trailer he lived in, a barn that had been empty 9 years, and an old paddock with a fence half fallen down. The barn used to belong to the previous owner's mule. Frank had bought the property because it was cheap and because nobody else lived close. He hadn't planned on filling that barn. Now he was about to. The vet met them at the gate. Dr. Lena Park. She'd worked on Frank's dog years ago. She was the only person within 100 miles he trusted with an animal. She climbed into the trailer, and she was in there a long time. When she came out, her gloves were bloody up to the wrists. Frank, you want me to be honest with you? Always. Whoever did this didn't want her to live. They worked at it. The leg's broken in 2 places. She's got internal bleeding I can't fully see without imaging. She's malnourished. There are old marks under the new ones. This wasn't one bad afternoon. This is months. Frank didn't say anything. I can try, doctor. Park said. I can splint that leg, stitch what I can stitch, get fluids in her. But you need to understand. She might not make it through the night. And even if she does, she might never trust a human being again. Are you ready for that? Frank looked at the trailer. The mayor's one good eye was watching him through the slats. Do what you can, he said. Doctor. Park worked on the mare in the barn. Frank ran a string of work, lights on extension. Each time Dr. Park sat back on her heels and waited, and the mare came up again. By 2 in the morning, the leg was wrapped. The wounds were stitched. An IV was running into her neck. Dr. Park stood up. She looked exhausted. She'll either make it or she won't, she said. I'll come back at 6. Don't leave her alone. Tully drove Dr. Park home. Frank sat in the barn. He sat in the barn all night. He found a folding chair in the shop and dragged it into the stall and put it in the corner where he could watch her without being in her face. Every 20 minutes or so he stood up slow, walked over slow, and laid a hand on her neck just to feel her breathing. Every time he did it, the mare flinched. Every time she kept breathing. Around 4 in the morning, Frank started talking to her again. My old man had a horse, he said. Down in Tennessee. I was maybe 8. That horse hated him. Hated everybody, really. Except me. I don't know why. I never did anything special. I'd just go out at night sometimes when my old man was passed out, and I'd sit in that stall and the horse would come stand over me. Like I was being watched. Protected, maybe. I don't know. The mare didn't move. But her ear turned toward him. I haven't thought about that horse in 40 years. He sat there until the sun came up. The mare made it through the night. She made it through the next night, too. By the end of the week, she was eating soaked grain out of a bucket, slow and suspicious. By the second week, she was standing on 3 legs without help. The vet came every other day. The bills started piling up on Frank's kitchen table, and Frank didn't open them and didn't care. Tully started coming by every morning. He'd been a farrier 40 years, and he knew things Frank didn't. He showed Frank how to wrap a leg, how to clean a wound without tying the horse down, how to stand so she could see you. She's not gonna spook you, Tully said. She's gonna spook at you. Don't take it personal. Frank nodded. She's got a brand, Tully said one morning, running his hand over her shoulder. Right there. See it? Frank looked. There was a small mark in the hide, faded but clear once you knew where to look. A letter P inside a circle. I know that brand, Tully said. Holly's Pearl. Got a place out past Yucca Valley. Calls himself a horse trader. Buys cheap. Sells cheap. The ones he can't sell, he gets rid of. Gets rid of how? Tully didn't answer. He just looked at Frank. Yeah, Frank said. Okay. That was on a Tuesday. By Friday, Frank had driven out past Yucca Valley in his pickup truck. He didn't go to Holly's Pearl's place. He just drove the road. He looked at the property from a distance. There were maybe a dozen horses in a dirt pen. No grass. No shade. A barn that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a year. A red pickup truck parked next to a feed shed. Frank sat in his truck a long time looking at it. Then he drove home. He didn't tell Tully where he'd been. The mare kept healing. Slow but healing. She'd been with him 3 weeks now. She would let him touch her shoulder without flinching. She'd stopped pinning her ears when he walked into the barn. One morning he came out at dawn with her bucket, and she nickered at him. Just once. A low, soft sound deep in her chest. Frank stood there with the bucket in his hand and didn't move for a full minute. He named her sister that day. Didn't have a reason. The name just showed up in his head and stuck. By the 4th week, she was walking on the bad leg in short, careful steps. Doctor Park said the bone was knitting. Said she'd probably never run again. Said she'd probably live. Frank started leaving the stall door open during the day. Sister would come out into the paddock and stand in the sun and graze whatever brown grass she could find. Frank rebuilt the fence one panel at a time. Took him most of a Saturday. When he was done, he sat on the porch of his trailer with a cup of coffee and watched her move around the pasture. She was thin. She'd always be thin. She walked with a limp she'd always have. But she was standing in the sun, eating, blinking slow, and not afraid of every shadow. Frank thought, looking at her, that maybe the worst was over. That's what he thought. A car turned into Frank's drive at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning. It was a sheriff's department cruiser. Frank stood up off the porch. The deputy got out. Young guy. Maybe 28. Name tag said Maddox. He had a folder in his hand and an apologetic look on his face. Mr. Calloway, I'm Deputy Maddox. I got a report I need to follow up on. All right. A man named Holly's Pearl filed a complaint. Says you took a horse off his property 3 weeks ago. Says he wants it back. Frank let that sit for a second. He filed a complaint. Yes, sir. On me. Yes, sir. Frank almost laughed. He didn't. Deputy. Come back here. I want you to see something. He walked the deputy back to the barn. Sister was in her stall. The deputy stood in the doorway and looked at her. The leg in the wrap. The ribs. The scar on her shoulder where the brand was. The eye that had been swollen shut for the first week and was still cloudy. The deputy was quiet. Mr. Calloway, he said finally, I'm gonna level with you. I don't want to take this horse anywhere. But Mr. Pearl has a brand on file with the county. That brand's on this animal. He says you took her off the side of a road that runs along his property. Legally, this animal's his. Legally. Yes, sir. What if I told you I have a vet who can testify in writing that this horse was beaten over months? The deputy looked at him. Then I'd say go to court. File a cruelty case. Get a judge to issue an emergency order. But I can't do that for you. And until you do, Pearl's got a claim. He's giving you 48 hours to return the horse voluntarily. After that, he's pressing theft charges. After everything, 48 hours to hand her over to the man who'd done that to her. He went inside and called Dr. Park. Dr. Park was at his place within the hour. She brought a binder, photographs, her medical notes, every visit, every wound, every x-ray. She'd been documenting since day one without even being asked, the way good vets do. "Frank," she said, "I will testify. I will write affidavits. I will sit on the stand. But you need a lawyer. Today, I don't know any lawyers." "I do." She made the call right there from his porch. By that afternoon, Frank had a lawyer. A woman named Carla Reyes, who took animal cruelty cases for a living. She drove out to the property, met Sister, took photos of her own, and then sat at Frank's kitchen table and explained how the next 2 weeks were going to go. We file an emergency petition. We get a temporary order of custody. We argue cruelty under state penal code. With Dr. Park's documentation, we have a real case. Holly's Pearl will fight it. He has fought cases and this isn't going to be a fight you win in a parking lot. This is a fight in a courtroom. With paperwork. With a judge. And Holly's Pearl knows how to play that game. That was the moment everything changed for Frank. This wasn't about him and a man with a pipe anymore. This was about him and a system. And he didn't know that system. And he was scared of it in a way he hadn't been scared of anything in a long time. He nodded once. "Tell me what to do." Carla started him on paperwork that night. The hearing was set for 10 days out. She filed the emergency petition the next morning. By the end of the day, a judge had granted a temporary order keeping Sister at Frank's place until the hearing. That order was the first thing in the whole mess that felt like a win. Frank read it 3 times sitting at his kitchen table. If you've stayed with me this far, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that take time to tell, and the only way I keep telling them is if you're with me. Now back to Frank. Holly's Pearl was served. Holly's Pearl did not take it well. 2 nights before the hearing, Frank was in the barn around 11 at night, checking on Sister, when he heard tires on his gravel drive. He stepped out of the barn. A red pickup truck was rolling up his driveway with the headlights off. Frank reached behind him into the barn and pulled a pump-action shotgun off a hook by the door. He didn't raise it. He held it across his chest, both hands on it, the way a man holds a tool he doesn't want to use. The truck stopped about 30 feet from him. 3 doors opened. Holly's Pearl got out of the driver's side. He was a short man. Heavy. Mid-50s. Wearing a barn coat and dirty jeans. The 2 men with him were bigger. Younger. One of them had a tire iron in his hand. Holly's took 2 steps forward. "That's my horse in there," he said. "Get back in your truck. I came to take what's mine. There's a court order says she stays here till Friday. You signed for that order. Get back in your truck." Holly spit in the dirt. "Friday. After Friday she's mine again. So I'll save us all the trouble. I'll take her tonight. You're not gonna shoot a man over a horse." "I'm not gonna shoot anybody," Frank said. "I'm gonna stand right here. And you're gonna leave. Or you're gonna find out which one of us is wrong about that." The man with the tire iron took a step forward. That's when Sister walked out of the barn. She came up behind Frank slow, the leg still healing, and stopped at his shoulder. 3 weeks earlier she'd flinched when he so much as walked past her stall. Now she was standing next to him, ears forward, looking at the three men in the driveway. She knew them. Frank realized it as it happened. She knew Holly's Pearl by smell or shape or something a horse knows, and she had walked out of the barn into open ground anyway, and she was standing next to Frank. Holly saw it too. Something flickered on his face. "You think that horse picked you," he said. "That horse is a piece of meat. That horse is property." "She picked me," Frank said. "Get off my land." Then a sound came up the driveway. A deep, slow growl getting closer. The same sound that had been on an empty road a month ago. Only this time it wasn't one bike. It was 11. 11 Harleys came up Frank's gravel drive in a slow line, headlights on, engines rumbling low. They rolled past Holly's Pearl's truck and they parked in a long row across the front of the property, pointed inward, and the riders got off and stood. Hell's Angels. Burdu Charter. Frank's brothers. Frank hadn't called them. Tully had. The man with the tire iron lowered it to his side. The other man got back in the truck. Holly's Pearl stood there a long second. He looked at Frank. He looked at Sister. He looked at the 11 men, with leather vests standing behind Frank's gate. Then he turned around and walked back to his truck. "This isn't over," he said. "Yeah," Frank said. "It is." Holly's got in. The truck reversed down the drive, turned on the highway and was gone. For about 30 seconds, nobody said anything. Frank's brothers just stood there. Sister stood there. Frank stood there. Then a heavy man with a white beard, the chapter president, stepped forward. "Frankie, you all right?" "I'm all right. Tully says you got a court date Friday." "I do. We'll be there." And on Friday they were. The courtroom in San Bernardino County was small and bright. Holly's Pearl sat at one table with a bored-looking lawyer. Frank sat at another with Carla Reyes. Dr. Lena Park sat behind Frank with her binder. Tully sat next to her. And in the rows behind them, 11 men in leather vests sat with their hands folded, quiet as church. The judge was a woman in her 60s, with reading glasses on a chain. She looked over the binder for a long time. She looked at the photographs. She looked at the x-rays. She read Dr. Park's affidavit twice. She asked Holly's Pearl to stand. "Mr. Pearl, you've owned this horse how long?" "About a year." "And how did the horse end up with 2 breaks in her foreleg, internal bleeding, and stitches across her flank?" "She was in a pasture accident." "A pasture accident?" "Yes, ma'am." The judge took her reading glasses off. "Mr. Pearl, I have an affidavit here from a licensed veterinarian who has examined this animal over 6 visits. I have photographs of old scarring under newer scarring. I have a description of injuries that, in this veterinarian's opinion, could not have been caused by a single accident. Do you have any veterinary documentation of your own?" "No, ma'am." "Any witnesses to this pasture accident?" "No, ma'am." "Mr. Pearl, I'm awarding permanent custody of the animal to Mr. Calloway. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review under the state animal cruelty statutes. You're free to go. For now." She tapped the gavel. Frank didn't move. He'd half expected to lose. He'd half expected the system to do what systems do, which is protect the man who knew how to use them. Instead, the judge had just said Sister was his. Carla put her hand on his arm. "Frank, we won." He nodded slow. He couldn't quite get his throat to work. Behind him, Tully said softly, "Let's go home, brother." Frank stood up. The 11 men in leather vests stood up with him. They walked out of that courtroom together. Holly's Pearl was charged with felony animal cruelty 4 months later. He pled out, lost his livestock license, lost his property in a civil suit. Carla helped a different family file the next year. The horses on his land were placed with rescues across 3 counties. But that was paperwork. That was later. This is what happened in Frank's life. Sister came home from the courthouse in a borrowed trailer, and Frank put her back in the same stall she'd lived in for the past month. She walked in on her own. She looked at Frank. He shut the gate. "Welcome home, sister." She blew air out of her nose. The summer went on. Sister kept healing. The leg never came all the way back, but she could walk a slow circle of the pasture without favoring it too much. The cloudy eye stayed cloudy, but she could see out of it well enough. The ribs filled out. Her coat went from dull straw to a dark, shining red. Frank built her a real paddock. Tully helped. 2 of the brothers came out one Saturday and helped string the fence. They didn't make a big deal of it. They just brought tools and showed up and worked. By sundown, there was a clean square of pasture with a strong 4-rail fence and a gate that latched. Sister watched them from the barn doorway the whole time. Once the work was done, she walked out of the barn, took 2 slow steps onto the new grass inside the new fence, lowered her head, and started eating. Frank stood at the gate and watched her. The chapter president, the man with the white beard, stood next to him. "You ever ride her, Frankie?" "No." "You gonna?" "No." "Why not?" Frank thought about it. "She's earned the rest of her life," he said. "She doesn't owe me a ride." The president nodded. "That's what I figured you'd say." Fall came. Then winter. Frank put a heated waterer in her stall. He bought her a blanket for the cold nights, even though Tully laughed at him for it. He cleaned her stall every morning before work and every night after. He talked to her the same way he had on the side of the road. Quiet. Slow. About nothing. She started meeting him at the gate every evening when his bike pulled up. She'd give that low, deep nicker. He'd put his hand on her neck. She'd lean into it. That was the thing that broke him in the end. Not the trial. Not the night with the truck. Not the morning he'd found her on the road. It was an evening in November. He came home tired. He pulled up. He shut off the engine. And there was Sister at the gate, waiting for him, the way she did every night now. He walked over. He put his hand on her neck. And she leaned her whole weight into him, the way a horse will when she trusts a person completely. And he stood there in the cold dusk with his face against the side of her neck and finally let himself feel it. Frank Calloway had not cried since he was 11 years old. He cried that night, standing in his own driveway, with his hand on a horse that someone had left for dead on the side of a road. That was the bond. That was the whole thing. He didn't tell anybody about it. In the spring, Frank fenced off another 4 acres of his property. He didn't say what for. Tully figured it out before he did. "You're gonna do this again," Tully said one morning. "Aren't you?" Frank shrugged. "There's a lot of horses out there." By the time 5 years had passed, there were 6 horses on Frank's property. Sister was the queen of the pasture. The newer ones followed her around like she was their mother. Some of them had come from Holly's Pearl's old place after the seizure. Some had come from auction lots. All of them had come hurt. Frank never named the operation. He never put a sign out. He never asked for donations. The brothers helped pay vet bills when bills got tight. Dr. Park gave him a discount that wasn't really a discount. Tully showed up every morning at 6. Frank still rode with the Burdu Charter every other Saturday. He still wore the cut. The patch on his back still said what it said. But on the days he wasn't riding, he was in his pasture, in the early light walking slow among horses that were learning, one quiet morning at a time, that not every man with rough hands meant harm. The story ends here, with a man and a horse standing in a pasture in the cold morning. That first day on the road, with a boot in her ribs and a pipe coming down on her leg, Sister had no reason to believe she'd ever stand in a pasture again. Frank Calloway had no reason to believe his life had room left for anything new. They were both wrong about themselves. And that's the part that's worth telling.